Hi, everyone. I'm Jenn, the Community Engagement Prevention Director at Hartley House, filling in today for Caroline. Today, we sat down with the Chief Assistant State's Attorney, Lindsey Carpenter, and Hartley House's Director of Community-Based Services, Jennifer, to talk about Human Trafficking Awareness Month, why it matters, and the upcoming Human Trafficking Response Team's annual summit at the end of the month. Lindsey Carpenter is the Chief of the Special Victims Unit at the State's Attorney's Office, handling sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking cases. She's been a prosecutor for 12 years and has worked in the anti-trafficking arena for almost 14. Lindsey has been co-chair of the Frederick County Human Trafficking Task Force since its inception in 2018, collaborating with community partners to ensure a victim-centered response to human trafficking in Frederick County. Jennifer serves as the Director of Community-Based Services at Hartley House, guiding programs that support survivors and strengthen the community. She first joined the organization in 2021 as our first child trafficking regional navigator, building on 13 years of experiencing supervising a transitional age youth program. She's passionate about collaboration and survivor-centered advocacy, and she also co-chairs the Frederick County Human Trafficking Task Force with Lindsey. She works closely with partners across the region to improve awareness, prevention, and access to services for survivors. We hope you enjoy today's show. Thanks, Lindsey and Jenn. Thank you for being here with us today. Can we start off by you telling us a little about yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Lindsey Carpenter. I'm Chief of the Special Victims Unit at the Frederick County State's Attorney's Office. I handle all sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking cases. I first was a prosecutor in Baltimore County, which is where I first started working my anti-trafficking work. I worked under a prosecutor who handled human trafficking cases there. When I came to Frederick County in 2017, I became a member of the Human Trafficking Task Force here in Frederick County, and I've continued working in the anti-trafficking arena in Frederick County ever since.
Amazing. How about you?
So I'm Jennifer, and I came to Hartley House in 2021 and started the Regional Navigator Program here. And now I'm the Community Service-Based Director here at Hartley House. Before I came to Hartley House, I was running a program in the community here in Frederick for over 10 years, working with transitional age youth.
Amazing. Let's start by just level setting for everyone. What is human trafficking and what isn't it?
I think a lot of times people get confused with human trafficking and smuggling, and both of those are very different.
So I would say human trafficking is the provision of sex or labor by force, fraud, or coercion is the most simple definition. It doesn't require transportation across borders. It doesn't require transportation across state lines. Someone can be trafficked in Frederick County by a Frederick County trafficker, and the victim resides in Frederick County. There doesn't have to be any movement. I will also say that typically human trafficking that we see here in Frederick is not what you see in the movies. Typically, the trafficking that we see is mainly coercive as opposed to force or bondage.
And it also can be online. It doesn't even need to happen with youth in person.
Can you speak a little more to that? Because I do think that's confusing for some people of how can someone be trafficked online?
So kids are frequently trafficked online by being groomed. Someone's filling a need, and they're sending pictures in exchange for items or money. Typically in Frederick, we've seen that they actually do arrange a meetup eventually, and they do meet up with the victim. Yeah.
So what makes Frederick County vulnerable to human trafficking, and what trends are you seeing locally?
So based on our location, we are in between major metropolitan cities. So I do have the unique experience of working trafficking cases in Baltimore County. And typically in Baltimore County, you would have the victim from Baltimore City or Baltimore County being trafficked in Baltimore County. Frederick, it's very different, especially for sex trafficking. We see a lot of transitional where they make a stop in Frederick on their way between maybe Baltimore and Philadelphia. In terms of labor trafficking, We see a lot of the unaccompanied minors, unfortunately, who end up in Frederick County. It's not necessarily that they're placed here, but whenever they're placed with their sponsor, they end up being sent to Frederick County, and then unfortunately they're trafficked.
What is one thing that you wish people knew about human trafficking?
I mean, here for Frederick County, it happens here. We have high numbers here. It happens in our very own backyards.
I think the other thing I wish, and Jen kind of already touched on this, is what it looks like, right? Educate yourself. And I know that we've made a lot of progress nationwide, but especially within our community, of what trafficking is and what trafficking isn't. And I think that we need to continue to change the narrative and not use bondage imagery or not rely on movies such as Taken to demonstrate what trafficking is. You know, you see on Facebook the indicators of there's a zip tie on your rear view mirror. That means that you're flagged for trafficking. Could that happen? Yes. Is that what we're seeing? No, that's not what we're seeing. And back to Jen's point about the online safety, that is where traffickers are recruiting the vast majority of their victims through Instagram, through Facebook, through Snapchat. And I think it's so important that our community partners and our parents and our kids understand that online safety has a direct correlation of being aware and being safe and preventing human trafficking.
And I'm just going to add on to that, like even gaming applications, anything with a chat feature is what we're seeing. Now often they switch platforms, but anything with a chat feature, Fortnite, Roblox, even some of the school applications.
Right. And I know we all have kids in that age range. And I don't wonder, like with your kids, do they get annoyed with how locked down you keep things?
I'm the worst mom ever.
Yeah. I get that a lot. And I agree. I do feel like there are spaces where parents assume because something's rated 4+ or 9+ or 12+, well, then that's okay for my kid. And they're not going any further than just like maybe the age recommendations.
Right. I actually heard it on Fortnite.
Yeah. That's
like my kid was playing and I was sitting right there and someone's like, I bet we go to the same school. And I mean, that's how it starts.
And that's textbook, because then they're wanting your kid to be like, oh, I go to such and such elementary school or middle school. And then now they know where your kid goes, because kids are very trusting and they assume that the person they're talking to is the age they say they are.
Right.
We could do a whole podcast just on the internet stuff. But kind of building off of that, what are some other indicators or like red flags maybe of trafficking that the people could look out for?
So isolation. The other red flags is, especially for children, they're coming in with new hair, new nails, new shoes, things of value that they don't have money for. Someone being or wanting to be present all the time with them and speaking for them, especially in doctor's offices, hospitals, different things like that.
Even victims wanting to always be on their devices or communicating with a certain individual. We also see it with frequent missing incidents. So children who frequently go missing or are missing a lot of school, maybe children who are exhausted while they're in school because they're required to work all night and then they're still going to school. But I think that one of the biggest ones is that isolation. The trafficker wants to remove that individual from anyone that they could disclose to.
So when we're talking about youth especially, can you talk a little about the Regional Navigator Program and what that looks like?
Sure. So the Regional Navigator Program was developed out of the Child Sex Screening Act of 2019, and it was actually written into law when Governor Hogan was in office. So essentially, it ensures that any youth, child up to the age of 24 receive individualized, specialized services. And that includes sex trafficking and labor trafficking now. The program's throughout the state of Maryland, and each jurisdiction has its own regional navigator. And within that program, essentially me and Lindsey, and we have a team of people within our Human Trafficking Response Team that work together. When someone's identified or high risk or confirmed even, they have a lot of moving parts and a lot of different players at hand. It can get overwhelming for not only the victim, but their families. And so the regional navigator is a person that's centralized that can help navigate through everything. Also, the Regional Navigator Program can provide case management services, support services, connect the individual to other outside resources. And sometimes we get individuals, youth and adults, that are not from this area. So it's providing connections and resources to the area that they're from or need to get back to.
And how does that work? Can you speak a little more to how that works in collaboration with the state's attorney's office and other partners?
Yes, certainly. So the Human Trafficking Response Team actually was established prior to the Regional Navigator Program being established. So we already had a lot of core connections with community partners, including Hartley House. But when Jenn came along with the Regional Navigator Program, it really just solidified that central piece of ensuring that the victim has those wraparound services, because we have our law enforcement investigation, we have the Child Protective Services investigation, but we really want to make sure that regardless of what happens with the criminal piece, whether someone's charged or not charged, that we're really providing those wraparound services to not only the victim, but their family. And so that's why we work very closely with the Regional Navigator Program to ensure that, and even if the victim's not from Frederick, that we're connecting them to services outside of Frederick.
Which I think is why it's so important that they're in every county in Maryland.
Yes.
So that we are able to connect them, even if they aren't from here. So talking about the Human Trafficking Response Team, let's talk about the summit a little, because that's coming up in a few weeks. Can y'all talk a little maybe about the history of the Human Trafficking Summit here in Frederick?
Sure. So the Human Trafficking Task Force was established in 2017. We met monthly for that entire year. We provided a final report to the County Council in 2018. One of the recommendations was to continue that work as a response team. We found that because all of the agencies came together, we formed these great relationships and we really had that collaboration and we wanted to keep it going. And so in 2018, the Human Trafficking Response Team was established, and one of the goals of that was to provide an annual summit to provide education to community partners about the up and coming trends as it relates to human trafficking. So we've done this summit annually, I think every year except for maybe COVID. I think we took 1 year off, but we do it annually and we try to switch up our topics and bring in different speakers and provide different areas of education to individuals who either work with or may come in contact with victims, survivors, or those high risk of being trafficked.
Nice. So what are they going to be hearing this year at the summit? What can attendees expect?
So the one thing I'm very excited for is we're doing a topic that is checklist to conversation. A lot of our community partners and even Hartley House and the state's attorney's office, we all have check boxes that we look for to screen for trafficking. And in order to meet with a client, a victim, a family member, you can't just check off the checkbox and it be that. So it's how to turn that into an actual conversation.
That sounds really useful.
Yeah, we're very excited. And that was one of the, we also try to gear our topics toward feedback that we've gotten from prior attendees. And that was one of the things of, okay, we know these are the red flags, but how do we start that conversation, especially with a child who might be in school? You know, we notice that they're absent a lot of days or they've been missing a lot. How do we turn that into a conversation? So we're really excited about that. Another topic that I'm very excited about is we are having a topic on forced marriage. And I think a lot of people don't think about forced marriage in the context of human trafficking. I went and saw the presenter that we're going to have. I went and saw her this past year during a conference, and it was just very eye-opening of how many cases that may have already come across our desk that we've seen, and really just a better understanding of forced marriage and what that looks like.
That sounds really interesting. Because again, I think that's one of those things people have probably maybe heard about, but have no idea what it actually looks like.
Yes.
And again, would probably be very surprised that that's happening here
Yes.
And it
in
is.
Frederick County.
Yes.
Yeah. So who should attend the summit and why is it important?
So anyone who may come into contact with a victim, survivor, or high-risk victim, typically it is targeted towards individuals who work in those professions, such as teachers, other school staff, substance use providers, mental health providers, individuals who, are other community partners who might not be working right in line with the HTRT, but would come into contact with these individuals. And it's really one for collaboration to meet everyone else in the community who's working these cases and working these issues, because that's really how you make a difference for a victim, to be able to say, I know someone who can help you. Let me pick up the phone and call them. And then two, to just make sure that we're all staying up to date on the most up-to-date trends.
Are there professions that might be interacting with trafficking victims more regularly that might not actually realize it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say probably most likely banks, internet service providers, and any individual who may go into a home and be able to see what's going on. So appliance repair, any type of provider who's going to get that access that law enforcement wouldn't typically have, to be able to have eyes on of what is going on behind those closed doors.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people don't even think sometimes that they might have seen something, or they might be in those kinds of spaces and not realize that they actually might have a connection with somebody. I think the banks is a really good one to think about. And we've been talking about that a little. So from a larger perspective, what are some practical steps just the general public can take to support survivors, to support the work to prevent human trafficking?
I think the most important piece is to make sure that the correct narrative is being portrayed. And so again, that goes back to not using imagery that uses bondage or tape over their mouth or a particular type of victim, right? Like a young white girl, because we see victims across all ages, all nationalities, all genders. And we want to make sure that people aren't looking for this one type of victim that looks a certain way, and aren't looking for people that are hidden in a closet. Could that happen? Absolutely. But I think we need to make sure that we are portraying the correct narrative so that we know what to look for. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think the other thing is in terms of prevention, traffickers look for vulnerabilities. In every trafficking case that I've had where there's been multiple victims, not one of the victims had the same vulnerability. And the trafficker changed their methodology based on that victim to target that specific vulnerability. So when we're looking at prevention, we need to look at what are the vulnerabilities that this person has. Are they homeless? Do they have a special needs child that needs special medication that they can't afford? Are they a frequent missing child? Do they come from a broken home and they don't feel like they have that love and affection? Are they feeling like they need more resources? Whatever those vulnerabilities are, it's important to address those so that there's not something that trafficker can focus on.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, language is important. And using the terminology child prostitution or child porn, and really that's not what it is. A child can't consent.
So if someone believes they have seen someone who may be trafficked or they think they've witnessed something, what are the best steps for that person to take?
My recommendation is always call 911. I know that people can be concerned of, I don't know what I'm seeing, if that's really trafficking or not, but that's law enforcement's job, right? Like that is their job, to go out and assess and figure out what's going on. And several of the trafficking cases that I have prosecuted personally came from a concerned citizen calling 911. And so I think it's so incredibly important that if you see something that you think is concerning, call 911. If you're hesitant, still notify. There's tip lines for both the Frederick County Sheriff's Office as well as the Frederick City Police Department. If you're concerned of, I'm not sure, I don't want to call 911, call the tip line, call the non-emergency line. But my number one recommendation is notify law enforcement so they can investigate.
And also, I mean, everyone in the state of Maryland is a mandated reporter. And so making that report to CPS with all the information that you have.
And I think back to what you were saying, Lindsey, again, when we're talking about Frederick County, that's why this multidisciplinary team is so important, because our law enforcement are trained
Yes.
to be able to do those assessments, to check things out. You know, this isn't a situation where they might not know what they're looking for. You know, we have a group of people who are really well trained and looking into these things. So I appreciate you saying that. Any final thoughts about Human Trafficking Awareness Month, or anything else you want people to know?
I just appreciate how far Frederick has come since I've been here and been working in this arena. And like I said, both nationally and locally, just the changes that I've seen in terms of awareness and attention to this issue. And as Jenn said, it's happening here. We know it's happening here. And I just am so appreciative for our county for recognizing that and putting in the steps to continue to move forward so that we can identify and hopefully prevent future victimization.
Yeah.
And I love our team. I'm so thankful for all of the partners that we work with. Not to plug us too much, but, you know, we do get accolades from across the state of how well our team works here in Frederick County, because we are so collaborative and we do have that victim-centered approach where we all work together for the best interest of the victim, whether or not criminal charges are filed.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have an amazing team of people from different organizations that all come together and ensure that the client is at the center of everything. I would like to reiterate what Lindsey said, really knowing that this is happening in Frederick County. When I started as the regional navigator at Hartley House, I didn't think the numbers were going to be as high as they are. And it's here, it's happening.
Well, and I think when you started, there were 3 cases.
Yeah.
And
There was 3.
Do you want to say how many cases you have now?
Yeah. Right now we have a caseload, and this is high risk, suspected and confirmed sex and or labor trafficking. We have over 50 cases that we're working.
That's a lot. It is. And I think it's okay to brag on us. I think you guys have set the standard for the state when it comes to this multidisciplinary team model, this response team model. I think it's worth noting. It's a big deal. And I'm really proud that I get to know both of y'all and the whole team and be part of this. So I just want to thank y'all again for giving us your time today, for being here. We'll make sure to put in the show notes the link for the Human Trafficking Response Team Summit, as well as any numbers or other ways to get in touch that people need to know. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.